you should play The Forgotten City. The Forgotten City is a game with storied history, and if you're well versed in the modding scene for Skyrim, it's one you already probably know. It's the brainchild of Nick Pierce, an Australian lawyer who, to the best of my knowledge, isn't related to Alana Pierce, but screw it, this is canon now. Anyway, he was inspired by the Fallout New Vegas mod New Vegas Bounties, and realizing that mods have the potential to be just as good as any official DLC, as well as vehicles for some darn good storytelling, he began development on the Forgotten City as early as 2011. Pierce spent over 1,700 hours putting it all together before finally releasing it in 2015 to resounding critical acclaim. Not only was it well received by the modding community, but it also broke artistic barriers as it became the first mod in history to win a Screenwriters Award for its script at the 49th Annual Australian Writers Guild Awards ceremony in 2016. That same year, Pierce quit his day job and hired several other developers to form his own company, Modern Storyteller. The fledgling studio then got to work on reimagining the Skyrim mod as its own standalone game. Which brings us to the subject matter of this video, 2021's The Forgotten City, which is technically Modern Storyteller's debut release, and why I think you really should play it. Because honestly, I think that the accolades that it has garnered are well deserved. I haven't spent a whole lot of time with the original mod, but the small taste of it that I got really demonstrates the sheer amount of professionalism and care for quality that has gone into its development, something that very strongly carries over to the standalone version. Of course, certain concessions had to have been made, such as replacing the Roman LARPers from the Elder Scrolls with actual Romans and retooling the setting so that it deals with the great civilizations of antiquity rather than dwarves and fantasy Vikings. However, this recasting also allowed for a massive expansion of the game, both in terms of scope and content. Aside from some of the more obvious changes, like using professional voice actors, incorporating an all-new orchestral score, and including some new and unique gameplay mechanics to the new release, the Forgotten City's script doubled in size, expanding from 35,000 words in the original to a whopping 80,000 in the new version. These improvements do a great job of reshaping the mod into a brand new experience for veterans and newcomers alike. What you're left with is a pretty robust game that is a treat to dive into. The only problem with going into a product like this is that it lives and dies by the quality of its writing. And because the game is filled with plot twists and intrigue, and most of the fun comes from discovering character motivations on your own, it's very difficult to go into detail about it without giving anything away. There's a lot to talk about here, but I'm going to do my best to lightly touch upon the premise, just to give you a sense of what it's about. Anything more would be tantamount to spoiling the game, and this is something that is absolutely best served by exploring it yourself with as little information as possible. The game's setup is simple enough. You awaken next to a woman, it's a stretch for a lot of us, I know, but stick with me here, who has rescued you after you have apparently nearly drowned in a river. She tells you that there was someone else who washed ashore before you and had gone off into some nearby ruins. Going into these ruins activates a portal that draws you into the past where you find yourself in an ancient underground city. You're then given a quick tour of the place and taken to the city's magistrate, who fills you in on the fact that you entered a time portal that he has opened up in a last-ditch effort to prevent the city's destruction. You find out that the community is founded by a group of Romans who abide by the Golden Rule, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. However, here it's taken to an extreme. It isn't so much a guiding principle as it is a bludgeon to ensure that no laws in the city are broken, or more precisely, that no sins are committed, since you'll soon learn that what is considered a sin isn't the same as what is considered unjust. Nevertheless, this warning is plastered all over the city and carved into stone warnings that read, "The many shall be punished for the sins of the one. And if you do break this rule, then you're gonna have a bad time."
You fool.
The many shall suffer for the sins of the one.
What follows is a mystery game wherein you need to discover who's going to break this rule and damn everybody, because at the end of the day, someone will break the golden rule, and the only way to ensure your collective survival is through a Groundhog Day-esque time loop where you're going to be experiencing the same day over and over again until you somehow find a way to break the cycle, one way or another. Ultimately, you're looking for a way to create a time paradox that would prevent the need for the magistrate to create the portal in the first place, and that involves exploring the city, talking to the folks that live there, and helping them solve their problems. Simple, right? Given the game's origins, it should come as no surprise that Modern Storyteller has gone out of their way to create something that plays very similarly to Skyrim, but is not constrained by its limitations. Everything about the way you interface with the game is extremely similar, even going so far as to emulate conversations and in-game events in the exact same style. Hell, they even use the same quest pop-up sound effect that Skyrim does. Well, if it's not the exact one, then it's similar enough to have fooled me. That being said, the Forgotten City is no clone. It does a great many things differently from its original counterpart. For one, combat takes an even greater backseat than it did in the mod. That's not to say that the original didn't execute some restraint, but because it was a Skyrim mod, there were still segments of it that were built around combat because that's one of the things that was central to the Skyrim experience. The Forgotten City takes this a step further by limiting its action sequences rather heavily. When you do enter a combat section, it's very deliberately designed, and even offers you a chance to not play it if action or horror elements aren't your cup of tea. There are no weapons to be found in the game, save for one, which is due to the Magistrate's weapon ban in order to prevent anybody from committing a murder and thereby killing everybody else in the process. And once you do find yourself a weapon, it has a very specific and limited use in-game. As a result, the game ultimately punishes you for using brute force, but it rewards your creativity and cunning. This is especially true since the game is primarily designed as a vehicle for its storytelling first and foremost, and that's where the Forgotten City truly shines. The bulk of the game will consist of talking to the very colorful cast of characters in the city, wherein you'll face a multiplicity of interpersonal conflicts and motivations that add a whole lot of depth to each and every one. There are plenty of secrets to discover about everyone, and it's only through dialogue that you'll be able to uncover even more quest leads and get to the bottom of what exactly is going on in this place and why everything is balancing on a razor's edge. There's a lot to uncover here, ranging from gossip and secrets about other characters to disseminating how these antique cultures see the Golden Rule and how it reflects in their own respective beliefs and creeds. Those individual layers are put on full display once you begin to uncover their quirks and foibles, many of which need to be navigated in order to uncover the bigger picture and the roles that they play within it. Their personalities interconnect in the way that a conspiracy theorist sees connections between pieces of string on a corkboard, and it wouldn't surprise me if this was actually the method that the devs used while writing the game. What you end up getting is a storytelling display that is wholly gripping and downright spectacular, and it does a standout job of using character personalities as nav points to guide you through the city as you uncover its secrets. The core gameplay loop is to discover as much information as you can and solve as many leads as possible, all before time runs out and the Golden Rule is broken, forcing you to go back in time and start the day anew. This doesn't actually stymie your progress, however. Time may reset, but your inventory and knowledge of events does not, and so sometimes it plays to your advantage to gather items or trigger certain sequences, re-enter the portal, and then use those to your advantage to help solve some of those characters' problems. NPCs may not remember meeting you, but you'll know all about them, and the dialogue even changes to reflect this. One in particular can even be used to accomplish some errands on your behalf that preserve all of your progression up to that point, making the whole concept of a time loop far less tedious than it sounds, and cleverly circumventing any problems that would arise of you having to repeat the same events over and over manually. And that's because all of these are rules and not exceptions. The amount of detail that's been put into the game, with both physical and social exploration being the primary driving force, lends itself to a world where you feel as if you are driven to overturn every single rock and see what you can dig up. Little blurbs pop up and give you some insight into the Roman world as you look around for furtive clues. And if you pick the archaeologist background, you even get insight into the workings of the ancient world through dialogue options, and a chance to translate the graffiti that's left around the city, which is something that places like Pompeii are famous for. Honestly, the biggest downside to the game is that replayability may be somewhat limited due to its very nature, since mysteries aren't exactly the most engaging once they've already been solved. For what it's worth though, the journey to reach that conclusion is what counts, and the Forgotten City is quite the journey. Not to mention that the game also offers 4 separate endings with a canonical true ending that is, naturally, the hardest to achieve out of the bunch, but my goodness is it satisfying to see once you uncover it. And really, that's the one thing that defines the Forgotten City: satisfaction. It's a game that sets out to reimagine and readapt what was already an exceptionally well executed idea into something even bigger and better, and it succeeds at it. Few other Skyrim mods can say the same thing, as they're so intrinsically tied to their engine in the ways that the Forgotten City is not. Going through the game and tying up the loose ends of this time loop mystery adventure is a fulfilling experience, and is easily one of the more engaging video game narratives that I've played. It offers moments of introspection and really had me scratching my head at a number of different junctions while I tried to figure out how to navigate through them. And if that's not a sign of engagement, I don't know what is. All that is wrapped up in a narrative package that's so good, I think that even people who aren't typically into this sort of style of game can get something out of it. And that's why I think you should play The Forgotten City.